Good morning. Welcome to Amir 5858. I am Amir. I am thankful to all news resources and my team. Following are the news which have been reported by American, European, Canadian, African, Asian, Australian news channels and AFP, AP and Reuters news agencies. Now the news headlines. Hunter Biden guilty of 3 felony charges. Could go to jail for 25 years. Hamas response to UN resolution and the conditions of humanity in Gaza. 80 could be the age limit for congressmen. Mr. Biden and gun safety. Vice President of Malawi killed in a plane crash. Ukraine president got lots of pledges from European countries in Berlin. 4 Americans stabbed by a Chinese man in China. Transgender medical care is unconstitutional. Nathan hot dog eating contest. On Wall Street, Dow Jones Industrial down, Nasdaq and S&P 500 went up. Chemical plant shut down in Canada. Grizzly devastation. French PM invisible. Now the news in detail.
On this Tuesday night, the surprise end to a chemical battle in rural Ontario.
I can't believe it.
Why a Sarnia chemical plant is calling it quits, and what it could mean for the region's environmental fight.
Nobody ever really just closes in underground here with the industry anyway.
The press for peace.
Everyone has said yes, except for Hamas.
As the U.S. pushes for a Gaza ceasefire deal, the potential signs of hope. Grizzly devastation. The call for action after the passing of the beloved Grizzly family in southeastern BC.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. There has been a major development in a story Global News has been following for years. It involves the Aamjiwnaang First Nation of Ontario and an industrial plant under fire after high levels of a cancer-causing chemical were detected nearby. In a surprise move, INEO Styrolution says it is permanently closing. This facility is just meters from the Aamjiwnaang First Nation in southwestern Ontario. Back in April, community members reported feeling sick after high levels of benzene were recorded right across from the chemical plant. The company has been under immense pressure from both the provincial and federal governments to curb toxic emissions. Our chief investigative correspondent, Carolyn Jarvis, has our top story tonight.
I'm super excited inside. I can't believe it.
Despite years of fighting for cleaner air in Aamjiwnaang First Nation, community leaders are saying the fight isn't over. Farah?
Carolyn Jarvis in Toronto. Thank you, Carolyn. We're learning more tonight about the bombshell report released last week by an intelligence watchdog that suggested some elected officials in Canada colluded with foreign powers. Elizabeth May is the first party leader, other than the Prime Minister, to read an unredacted version, and she says the media firestorm is overblown. David Aiken has more on May's revelations. David?
Well, for our Green Party leader Elizabeth May has read the blacked-out portions of last week's report from the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, or NSICOP. Now, like expect to do so in the coming days, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has declined such a briefing. Farah.
David Aiken in Ottawa. Thank you, David. There's fresh fallout today from the Liberals' controversial measure to increase capital gains taxes for the wealthiest Canadians. Today, their main opponent, the Conservatives, finally stood up to vote against the measure, giving the Liberals and the NDP fresh ammunition to target Pierre Poilievre. Mackenzie Gray joins us now from Ottawa. Mackenzie, first let me ask you, what was the Conservatives' rationale behind their vote against the capital gains tax inclusion rate?
Yeah, for Pierre Poilievre, well, he might as well have been in the movie Dodgeball the last few months because he's been dodging, ducking, dipping, and diving out of his explanation on his position on capital gains until today.
The Prime Minister admits life sucks, in his own words. How is that fair? Mr. Speaker, now his solution is to
There to be major internal pressure for him to quit.
Oh, the vote rich 416. All right, thank you, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. The looming strike at Canada's borders has been averted. The union representing Canada Border Services Agency workers has reached a tentative deal with the federal government. More than 9,000 workers were set to strike on Friday, but job action has been avoided pending ratification of the agreement. The strike in August of 2021 caused major delays across the country and nearly brought commercial border traffic to a standstill. Union members are expected to vote on the deal in the coming days. To the Middle East now. Hamas has given its reply to a United Nations-backed ceasefire deal to mediators. The foreign ministries of Qatar and Egypt say they're examining the response aimed at ending the bloodshed in Gaza and securing the release of hostages taken on October 7th. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says it's clear the world supports the ceasefire proposal, but as Crystal Demensing reports, Israel and Hamas have yet to sign on.
America's top diplomat is pitching a plan for peace again.
Let's work together to ensure that more aid gets into Gaza, and once it's in Gaza, reaches the people who need it the most.
The United States pledged an additional $400 million in aid while touring the Middle East promoting was in November. The agreement held for 7 days. Crystal Demensing, Global News, London.
The UN Human Rights Office is citing possible war crimes by Israeli forces and Palestinian armed groups in connection with a deadly raid by Israeli forces that freed 4 hostages.
The manner in which the raid was conducted in such a densely populated area seriously calls into question whether the principles of distinction, proportionality and precaution, as set out under the laws of war, were respected by the Israeli forces.
The raid took place in a residential neighborhood in central Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry says at least 274 Palestinians were killed, many women and children. The UN says it's deeply distressed the hostages are being held in densely populated areas. Hunter Biden, son of American President Joe Biden, was found guilty today on felony gun charges. It's the first time the child of a sitting U.S. president is being convicted of a crime. After just 3 hours of deliberations, the jury found Hunter made false statements about his illegal drug use when he purchased a gun in October of 2018. His defense argued Hunter thought he was in recovery and no longer a drug user when he bought the gun. The 54-year-old faces up to 25 years in jail as a first-time offender. Experts say he is unlikely to get anywhere near the maximum. Calls for action after the tragic death of a rare white grizzly and her cubs. Coming up, what conservationists say needs to be done in order to keep the animals safe.
Yango. Different from attack.
In Toronto, police are investigating a deadly crash involving 3 dump trucks. It happened this afternoon along the Gardiner Expressway, a busy section of road in the city's downtown core. One of the trucks caught fire. The driver, a man in his 50s, died at the scene. The crash caused major delays for commuters. It's not the news Calgarians wanted to hear after last week's water main break. Water restrictions are going to remain in the city until at least the middle of next week.
We appreciate that this is longer than the minimum timelines perhaps originally understood. We are proceeding with an abundance of caution. We want to make sure that this work is done right and it's done safely.
The city says the replacement pipe will arrive today, but it's expected to take up to 7 days to install, repair, flush out, and test before restrictions can be lifted. Conservationists say more needs to be done to protect bears in Western Canada after the tragic death of a rare white grizzly and her cubs. The animals were killed in 2 separate incidents on the Trans-Canada Highway near Lake Louise, Alberta, and they're not the first. According to Parks Canada, over the last 5 years, more than 60 bears have been killed in the region in road or rail accidents. Heather West reports.
They were a beautiful and celebrated sight throughout Yoho National Park this spring. Nakota, a rare white grizzly bear, and her first set of cubs.
She just immediately drew an emotional reaction from everybody. Photographers, tourists, everybody flocked.
And survive. Heather West, Global News, Canmore, Alberta.
Still ahead, mourning in Malawi after its vice president dies in a plane crash. A desperate journey to a better life has ended in tragedy for another group of migrants. On Monday, a boat carrying roughly 260 people from Somalia and Ethiopia capsized off the southern coast of Yemen. At least 49 people drowned, another 140 are missing, 6 kids are among the dead. Yemen is a major stopover for migrants from the Horn of Africa who are trying to reach the Gulf countries for work. Malawi's vice president and 9 other people have been killed in a plane crash. Their small military aircraft went missing yesterday in poor weather. The remains were flown back to Malawi's capital today, and the president led a moment of silence as he addressed the nation. Malawi's vice president was seen as a potential candidate in next year's presidential election. A suspect has been arrested in northeast China, where 4 American college instructors are recovering from a stabbing. And a warning, the video you're about to see is graphic. Footage released late Monday shows the aftermath of the stabbing. The victim's conscious and covered in blood. Chinese authorities say the suspect collided into one of the American educators before attacking the group, which was visiting a partner university in China. The stabbing is being called a random incident by officials. That's Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Farah Nasser on behalf of our whole crew here. I want to thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Tonight's Your Canada is this Inukshuk overlooking Kuluktuk Nunavut. We love seeing your Canada, so please keep emailing us your pictures to viewers at globalnational.com.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amin Avaz. On the NewsHour tonight, Hunter Biden is found guilty of all 3 felony counts in his federal gun trial.
Hamas responds to the latest Israeli hostage deal proposal as the humanitarian situation in Gaza worsens.
And a ballot measure in North Dakota seeks to block people over the age of 80 from representing the state in Congress.
There is a lot of wisdom that comes with age, but of course there's a limit to where, we all face a decline of some kind at some point, and so we wanted to try to find the right balance.
Welcome to the PBS NewsHour. Another first in our country's history. The child of a president was convicted today on 3 felony charges. Joined by family and the First Lady, Hunter Biden attended federal court in Delaware to hear the jury hand down a guilty verdict in the trial around his illegal gun possession.
The jury found Hunter Biden guilty on 2 counts of making false statements regarding his drug use when filling out paperwork to purchase a firearm, and guilty on 1 count of illegal possession of a firearm by a drug user or addict. The jury deliberated for just under 3 hours, and special counsel David Weiss, who prosecuted the case, spoke about the verdict earlier today.
Ultimately, this case was not just about addiction, a disease that haunts families across the United States, including Hunter Biden's family. This case was about the illegal choices defendant made while in the throes of addiction. No one in this country is above the law. Everyone must be accountable for their actions, even this defendant. However, Hunter Biden should be no more accountable than any other citizen convicted of this same conduct.
Hunter Biden released a statement after the verdict saying, quote, "I am more grateful today for the love and support I experienced this last week from Melissa, my family, my friends, and my community than I am disappointed by the outcome. Recovery is possible by the grace of God, and I am blessed to experience that gift one day at a time."
NPR Justice correspondent Ryan Lucas has been in the courtroom throughout the trial, and he joins us now. So, Ryan, help us understand how the jury arrived at convictions on all 3 counts, because Hunter Biden's lawyers argued that he didn't knowingly violate the law because he wasn't actively abusing drugs at the time he filled out that form and purchased the firearm.
Right. Well, remember, this case all revolves around a gun that Hunter Biden bought in October of 2018 that he owned for 11 days before it was disposed of in a trash can. And so what prosecutors did is they presented text messages that Hunter sent from 2015 through 2019 in which he talks about his drug use, in which he talks about buying drugs. They also presented Hunter's own memoir in which he talks about his drug use, his downward spiral into addiction to crack cocaine, all establishing for the jury that Hunter was indeed addicted to drugs. And then
In the day's other headlines, just hours after his son Hunter was convicted on gun-related charges, President Biden addressed gun safety in a Washington speech today. The president is looking to draw a line between himself and his rival, Donald Trump, on the issue of gun control ahead of the November election. At an Every Town for Gun Safety Action Fund event, Biden took aim at Trump's lack of action on the issue when the former president was in office.
More children are killed in America by guns than cancer and car accidents combined. My predecessor told the NRA convention recently, he's proud that, quote, I did nothing on guns when I was president. And by doing nothing, he made the situation considerably worse.
For his part, Trump has vowed to roll back any gun control advances made during Biden's presidency. The president of Malawi confirmed today that his vice president died in a military plane crash along with 9 others. Authorities say Saulos Chilima's flight departed the capital of Lilongwe yesterday morning. The plane disappeared after it was unable to land at Mzuzu International Airport amid bad weather. The president announced on state TV today that the aircraft's wreckage was found in thick forests with no survivors. Chilima was first elected vice president in 2014. He was 51 years old. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky drummed up military and financial support from European leaders today at the start of a 2-day conference in Berlin. Host nation Germany promised to give Kyiv new air defense systems, and Italy pledged $150 million to rebuild Ukraine's energy infrastructure, often targeted in Russian strikes. The World Bank estimates that Ukraine will need $500 billion over 10 years to rebuild. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz played up Ukraine's bid for EU membership in making his pitch to the conference for more aid.
The reconstruction of the country will require massive investment. As a reminder, we are talking about the reconstruction of a future member state of the European Union.
All this comes ahead of an international peace conference in Switzerland this weekend. Nearly 90 countries are set to attend. Russia was not invited. China has arrested a suspect in the stabbing of 4 Americans on Monday in what police believe was a random attack. Officials say the 55-year-old suspect attacked the victims after colliding with them in a public park. Their injuries are not life-threatening. A Chinese tourist was also wounded in the attack. The victims were instructors from Iowa's Cornell College who were teaching at a Chinese university in Jilin. China's foreign ministry said the incident wouldn't affect exchanges between the two countries.
Engaging in U.S.-China people-to-people exchanges is in line with both sides' interests. China has always taken effective measures and will continue to take such measures to earnestly protect the safety of all foreigners in China.
The U.S. State Department says it's in touch with local authorities about the attack and is monitoring the situation. A federal judge ruled that the Florida law restricting gender-affirming medical care is unconstitutional. The 2023 law blocked transgender minors from receiving treatment like puberty blockers and hormones. It also limited the options for transgender adults to be treated. Senior Judge Robert Hinkle wrote, transgender opponents are not free to discriminate against transgender individuals just for being transgender. Governor Ron DeSantis said his office will appeal the decision. Johnson & Johnson has agreed to pay $700 million to settle an investigation by 42 states into its marketing of baby powder and other talc-based products. The deal resolves charges that the company told consumers the products were safe while knowing they had links to cancer. In a statement, Colorado's Attorney General, who was among the plaintiffs, said, quote, today's settlement sends a message that we will hold companies accountable for their deceptive and harmful conduct. Johnson & Johnson did not admit to any wrongdoing. And on Wall Street today, stocks ended mixed ahead of Wednesday's inflation data and Federal Reserve meeting. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost 120 points to close at 38,747. The Nasdaq added 151 points to close at a new record. The S&P 500 also ended at an all-time high. And a staple of the American summer is losing a key ingredient this year. Joey Chestnut will not be competing at the Nathan's hot dog eating contest on July 4th. The 16-time champion found himself at odds with event organizers over his decision to endorse the Impossible line of vegan meat products. In a statement, Major League Eating said, quote, we are devastated to learn that Joey Chestnut has chosen to represent a rival brand. Emily also called Chestnut, quote, an American hero, and said they would welcome him back if he drops his other endorsement deal. Still to come on the NewsHour, President Biden courts black voters as polls show support slipping in this key voting bloc. Outbreaks of bird flu at dozens of dairy farms raise concerns the virus could spread more widely to humans. And despite a major U.S. manufacturing push for semiconductors, companies struggle to find workers to build them.
This is the PBS NewsHour from W.
And remember, there's always a lot more online, including this Instagram story about a project that aims to decode the communication of whales with the help from AI.
And join us again here tomorrow night when Judy Woodruff travels to Pennsylvania to hear from people with opposing points of view on the Israel-Hamas war. And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amina Vaz on behalf of the entire NewsHour team.
Tonight, the historic verdict. Hunter Biden found guilty on all 3 counts in his federal gun trial. President Biden late today flying to Delaware and embracing his son on the tarmac after the jury found Hunter Biden guilty of lying about his drug use on a federal form used to buy a gun. He's now the first child of a sitting president convicted of a crime as his father faces a fierce re-election battle. Our interview with one of the jurors, what he says happened in the room, and could Hunter Biden be facing time in prison? Our team at the courthouse. Also tonight, Hamas responding to the newest Gaza ceasefire proposal backed by the U.S. and our exclusive interview with the families of American hostages after the deadly raid that freed 4 Israelis being held. The sting across the U.S. 8 men with suspected ties to ISIS arrested in 3 major cities after crossing the southern border. Our new reporting. The gunman opening fire at a downtown Atlanta food court, injuring 3 before he's shot by police. What we're learning. A horrifying attack in China. Several American teachers stabbed in a public park. The suspect in custody.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening and welcome. Tonight, Justice
Guilty on all counts. Hunter Biden is convicted on federal gun charges. Tonight we're hearing from one of the jurors about how they reached a verdict.
After you went through all the evidence, there was no question.
There was no question.
Plus, President Biden arrives in Wilmington to support his only surviving son after he saw the First Lady holding hands with Hunter moments after his conviction. The CBS Evening News starts now. Tonight, the president changing his schedule before heading overseas and going to Delaware to see Hunter Biden just hours after his son is convicted. Good evening, I'm Nora O'Donnell. Thank you for being with us. That moment of embrace captured on camera at the National Guard Airport, now named after the president's late son, Beau, who died of cancer in 2015. This trial publicly aired some of the first family's most painful moments, with just 5 months until the presidential election. The president says he will not pardon his son, as Hunter faces up to 25 years in prison. And it all started with this X on a federal firearms application in 2018. Hunter Biden claimed he was not an unlawful user of or addicted to illegal drugs. The jury decided that was a lie. CBS's Vijay Jang is in Wilmington, and she's going to start us off tonight.
Hunter Biden left court today holding hands with his wife and the First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, just after hearing the verdict. He stood in court, stared straight ahead, showing little emotion. After deliberating for just under 3 hours over 2 days, the jury found him guilty of 3 felony counts for illegally possessing a gun while he was addicted to crack cocaine and for making false statements about using drugs when he bought the firearm in October 2018. We spoke to juror number 10, who asked not to be identified. When you first got the case, how split was the jury?
We took a vote, and the vote revealed it was 6-6. It was a split decision.
He told us after combing through all the evidence, the jury was quick to make a decision.
The biggest thing that he did was lied about not being a drug addict and not using cocaine and buying a gun.
Several women in Hunter Biden's life took the stand during the week-long trial, which exposed the depths of Hunter Biden's drug addiction, including his former lover, Hallie Biden, the widow of his brother Beau, who said she found the gun in Hunter's truck near drug residue. Surveillance video showed her throwing it away in a dumpster. But legal experts say the most damaging testimony was Hunter Biden's own words from his memoir, Beautiful Things.
All my energy revolved around smoking drugs and making arrangements to buy drugs, feeding the beast.
Special counsel David Weiss, who oversaw the investigation into Hunter Biden, said no one is above the law.
Ultimately, this case was not just about addiction. This case was about the illegal choices defendant made while in the throes of addiction.
President Biden, who after the verdict changed his schedule so he could rush to Hunter's side in Delaware, said in a statement, "I am the president, but I am also a dad. Jill and I love our son, and we are so proud of the man he is today." Although Hunter Biden faces up to 25 years in prison, that is unlikely for a first-time offender. The judge did not set a date for the sentencing, but said it's usually about 4 months from the verdict, putting it just weeks from the November election. President Biden has said he will not pardon his son. Nora.
Rita Jang, thank you. Now to some breaking news. 8 possible terrorists, all foreign nationals, arrested in New York, LA, and Philadelphia, and they came into the country across the southern border. CBS's Errol Barnett has new reporting on what led to the arrests.
8 individuals, all from the Central Asian country of Tajikistan, were arrested in Los Angeles, New York, and Philadelphia. They entered the United States this year and in 2023, crossing the Mexican border. They were vetted and allowed to remain in the country. CBS News has learned further investigation uncovered the men had possible ties to ISIS-K, the terror group which claimed responsibility for an attack at a Moscow concert hall that killed more than 140 people earlier this year. The FBI used a wiretap to track the men, and sources say what they discovered led authorities to quickly arrest them on immigration charges.
Typically, bringing individuals in on immigration-related charges is the quickest and easiest way to take individuals back into custody, but that does not rule out additional terrorism-related charges further down the road.
FBI Director Christopher Wray warned earlier this year of a heightened threat level with thousands of people crossing the southern border.
Our most immediate concern has been that individuals or small groups will draw some kind of twisted inspiration from the events in the Middle East to carry out attacks here at home.
Sources tell CBS News that while authorities moved swiftly, there was no evidence of an active plot. Tonight, those men remain in ICE custody, Nora, pending extradition.
Errol Barnett with that breaking news, thank you. Tonight, millions of Floridians are bracing for flash flooding with storms that could bring a month's worth of rain in a matter of days. Right now, travelers flying in and out of Miami International Airport are being hit with delays and cancellations, and many roads are a flooded mess. CBS Manuel Bojorquez is in Miami, where it's going to rain all week long.
Tonight, tropical rainstorms in Florida are packing a punch. In Holiday, Florida, rain totals reached nearly 4 inches as roads there filled with water. The front end of the Chevy Impala became submerged on the side of the road. These men were driving by and helped push the car of another driver who got stuck in the flooding.
She didn't really know what she was doing, so we helped her steer out of traffic and get to the parking lot where she'll be safer.
Highways and streets also flooded in nearby Port Richey, where heavy rain and whipping winds were howling outside this auto dealership. The relentless storms made it hard to see for some drivers on I-95. In South Florida, Miami drivers and pedestrians are also trying to navigate through flooded roads.
I guess it's nice for a couple of days, and hopefully it's not that bad.
The weather is impacting air travel as well. At both Miami and Fort Lauderdale airports, there were more than 700 flight delays, causing a headache for some passengers.
We got here, thought we were on time, and now we are sitting and waiting.
The Miami area has been under a flash flood warning tonight, and Nora, this is just the beginning of what's expected to be a soggy week.
Manny Bojorquez, thank you so much. From Florida's torrential rains to the extreme heat from coast to coast, in Las Vegas, it is the 13th straight day of triple-digit temperatures. That's the hottest start to June on record. So let's bring in meteorologist Mike Bettis from our partners at the Weather Channel. He's going to start us off with news about the storms. Good evening, Mike.
Nora, good evening. The rain across Florida has been relentless. It will continue to do that. And you can see our virtual view here in Miami shows nothing but rain in the forecast and even some heavy thunderstorms over the next several days. We're tapping into deep tropical moisture that's just surging, especially in the central and south Florida. Some locations over the next few days could get as much as a foot of rain. Helpful for the drought that's there, but could lead to some flooding as well. Other big story that we're following is the amount of heat that's expanding across the west here. 112 in Phoenix for us tomorrow, 109 in Las Vegas with excessive heat warnings in effect. And some of that heat does spread eastward through the week. Temperatures could be 5 to 10 degrees above average as we get toward the weekend here. Nor some beach locations will be excellent toward the Ohio River Valley. Temperatures flirt with 90.
Mike Pettis, thank you so much. Now we'll look at tonight's other top stories, starting with that attack on 4 American teachers in China. A 55-year-old is under arrest, and authorities now say it was an isolated stabbing. CBS's Roxana Sidbury reports tonight from their small school in Iowa.
Police say the 4 instructors from Cornell College in Mount Vernon, Iowa, who were teaching at a university in Jilin, China, were in a park when a man started stabbing them. Tonight, that suspect is behind bars, and the 4 victims are recovering in a Chinese hospital, according to Jilin police. Officials have not released the victims' names, but one victim has been identified by his brother as David Zabner.
Adam Zabner told CBS News David spent a year teaching here at Cornell College and that the group was on a trip to a local temple when they were attacked.
The White House said today it's deeply concerned about the incident.
Now to some breaking news. 4 people, including the alleged gunman, were shot at a food court in downtown Atlanta. CBS's Dave Malkoff is at the scene with the new details.
The shooting happened around 2:15 p.m. today in the Peachtree Center Mall here in downtown Atlanta. Witnesses say people ran for their lives. The suspected gunman, a convicted felon, was shot by an off-duty officer who jumped into action after hearing the shots. Liliana Silva works nearby.
And somebody screamed there's a shooting, there's a shooter, run.
Within minutes, police had the area locked down and first responders were seen evacuating the injured on stretchers. The victims, 2 women and a man, were taken to the hospital. Police say this investigation is ongoing.
And tonight, UCLA is bracing for more protests ahead of the school's commencement. Here's CBS's Carter Evans.
Well, it's finals week here at UCLA, but Nora, it's not just grades and graduation on people's minds, especially after what happened here on campus last night with the latest round of college protests. About 25 pro-Palestinian demonstrators were arrested after a mostly peaceful protest became chaotic. Some carrying fake corpses through campus, reciting the names of people who've died in Gaza. UCLA is still reeling from a dramatic incident last month when more than 200 were arrested.
And thanks to our CBS News teams across the country. The Atlanta police go on a high-speed chase after a hijacked transit bus. That's next. And then later in Eye on America, a California community rises from the ashes of a devastating wildfire. Breaking tonight, a suspect is in custody after a wild bus chase in the Atlanta area. Police say they responded to an argument on the bus, and when they got there, the hijacked bus took off with passengers on board. The bus hit several vehicles during the chase and even drove on the wrong side of the road. All right, a deadly wildfire nearly wiped out a California town. Next in Eye on America, we'll introduce you to residents helping to rebuild a stronger, safer, and more resilient community. And more resilient community. So far this year, nearly 42,000 acres have burned in California wildfires, with last week's Coral Fire the biggest at 14,000 acres. And that puts 2018's Camp Fire into perspective at more than 10 times the size of the Coral Fire. It was also the state's deadliest. Nearly 6 years later, victims of the Camp Fire are still putting their lives back together, whether they chose to rebuild or start over somewhere else. Here's CBS's Jonathan Bigliotti from Paradise, California, with tonight's Eye on America.
95% of Paradise surrendered to flame in the 2018 Camp Fire, the once lush landscape covered in pine trees stripped bare. But from the ashes, a new breed of American pioneer was born.
Hi, oh my God, it's so good to see you.
Kylie Warble and her daughter Ellie were one of the first families to return.
A lot of people don't want to come back here. I have to stay here.
We first met the Warbles back in 2019, 6 months after the firestorm destroyed everything. They barely escaped with their lives.
Why are you crying?
What's that?
Talking about everything that happened to us.
Between then and now, how has life for both of you changed?
Even though we lost everything in the fire, it's nice to have something new. You heal every single day. It's nice to get back in our hometown because then it's like you get a fresh start on life.
And thousands of people have come back for a fresh start. In fact, Paradise was the fastest growing city in California for the past 4 years.
Is it a crazy idea to move back to a community that has been decimated by wildfire?
You know, it's not a crazy idea, and people who do decide to rebuild in a place like Paradise, they're often even safer than they were before the fire because that place has already been burned.
Jennifer Gray Thompson is founder of After the Fire, a nonprofit that helps people decide if they should rebuild.
Well, people do live in the woods now because it's naturally occurring affordable housing often. So when we tell people don't live in the woods anymore, I say, let's actually help the people now who are not fire affected to actually remain, in place.
Today, fire threatens nearly 40% of all homes here in California. Well-intentioned firefighters were first trained to put out wildfires beginning in the early 1900s to protect a growing population. But all of that dead vegetation left behind, worsened by drought, led to a fuel source that, if sparked, can now be explosive.
In Paradise, efforts are focused on protecting against future fires. All power lines will be buried underground, and all residents must also remove vegetation too close to their homes. Federal grants are offered to homeowners who use fire-resistant materials to build their homes.
Do you feel like the new Paradise is more resilient if there was a wildfire nearby?
Yes, I do. the likelihood of seeing another wildfire in Paradise, it already devastated our whole community.
Not everyone agrees enough to return. While Paradise has seen record growth, the current population is only a third of what it was before the fire.
Paradise is a microcosm of just broader issues that our nation's going to have to grapple with more.
Researcher Ryan Miller is tracking our nation's growing climate migration and the conflict it's causing.
I'm hoping with some of the work we understand from Paradise, we can get ahead of some of those issues and prevent those disasters from happening later down the road.
But for Miller, this issue isn't just academic, it's deeply personal.
This was before we even got back to the house.
We'll bring you that part of the story tomorrow. For Eye on America, I'm Jonathan Bigliotti in Paradise, California.
A mother's tribute to her daughter and the community, nearly 12 years after the Sandy Hook shooting. That's next.
This portion of the CBS Evening News is sponsored by Olay, your best skin yet.
Finally, tonight's Heart of America, which takes us to Sandy Hook, Connecticut. Tomorrow, seniors will walk in Newtown High School's graduation ceremony, where they will honor their 20 classmates who were killed in the 2012 Sandy Hook shooting. 6-year-old Catherine Violet Hubbard was one of those first graders. In her honor, Catherine's family created an animal sanctuary in her memory and as a place of community healing. We spoke to Catherine's mom, Jenny.
My hope for their graduation is that we acknowledge that this is part of their fabric, but also give them permission to go and soar from this season of their life.
Well, the Catherine Violet Hubbard Animal Sanctuary and the families of Newtown, they are tonight's Heart of America. We are thinking of those families. And that is tonight's CBS Evening News. I'm Nora O'Donnell. Good night.
Tonight, several breaking stories as we come on the air. Hunter Biden guilty on all charges. Tonight, 2 jurors now speaking to ABC News. What they reveal inside the jury room. Jurors split right down the middle at first. Also, the stunning images coming in, the rush hour bus hijacking, and the secret recordings of Supreme Court justices tonight. The audio and what it reveals. First tonight, the historic verdict. Hunter Biden guilty on all 3 counts for illegally purchasing and possessing a gun while using drugs. Inside the courtroom the moment the verdict was read. And tonight, we take you inside the jury room. We'll hear from 2 jurors, revealing that jury was split down the middle 6-6 at first on whether to convict, deliberating for just 3 hours. President Biden on his son tonight, what the president is saying. Terry Moran standing by at the courthouse. Dan Abrams here on what Hunter Biden could now face at sentencing. Tonight, from New York City to Philadelphia to Los Angeles, 8 migrants who crossed into the U.S. illegally, detained with suspected ties to ISIS. What we're learning. That dramatic scene, the rush hour chase through Atlanta, crossing through 2 counties, police chasing a hijacked bus. The secret recordings of Supreme Court justices, Justice Samuel Alito and Chief Justice John Roberts, as well as the recording of Justice Alito's wife. What the audio reveals tonight, and the woman who recorded the conversations now defending herself. The storms, the flash flood threat, up to 20 inches of rain in Florida, and this record heat spreading across the country now, moving into the east. Possible records up and down the East Coast, 90s in the Northeast. There is news tonight on Oprah, hospitalized for a time, what was behind it, and how she's doing now. And the iconic 1983 movie The Outsiders, Matt Dillon, Tom Cruise, Rob Lowe, from the big screen to Broadway now. Tonight our team takes you behind the scenes.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and we begin tonight with the historic verdict. For the first time, the child of a sitting president has been convicted of a felony. Hunter Biden found
by pivoting to Christ. Our video of the day comes to us from Joe Mazzulla, a 35-year-old head coach of the Boston Celtics.
I will murder you.
A sports writer recently asked him what it's like to be a black head coach in the finals, and his answer left the audience speechless. Roll it.
Hey, Joe, Vince Lewis, Yahoo Sports. For the first time since 1975, this is the NBA Finals where you have 2 black head coaches. Given the plight sometimes of black head coaches in the NBA, do you think this is a significant moment? Do you take pride in this? How do you view this, or do you not see it at all? I wonder how many of those have been Christian coaches.
I haven't heard an awkward silence like that since I showed up at Larry Kudlow's house. In clothes. In clothes. Tyrus, what was the point the journalist was trying to make, and what was the point the athlete was trying to make?
Well, the journalist, come on, you need to stop using that term, man. That's more watered down than racist. Yeah. Stop. What Joe, and like I said, I used to, when Joe came in, I thought he was too young, he didn't have experience, he was a lifelong Celtic fan, and then he pulls a stunt like this. And you heard the proverbial race-baiting pin just drop. And nobody had a follow-up question because they're all full of they were trying to get him in a gotcha moment. And I'm glad to see a brother stand up and say, my skin has nothing to do with my coaching ability or anything like that. It was my work ethic and my faith that got me where I was at. And it just ended it. Forget the fact we're up 2-0. Forget the fact that we're going to probably sweep. Forget the fact that Will Kane has to probably wear I Love Tyra shirt for a whole week on TV for the bet. Yeah, I invaded his podcast and dropped him the bet, and the fool went for it. My kids have been prank calling him all week. But again, it just goes back to the point, like most of us, I'm so tired of, hey, is the funny black guy, my skin color or light skinness has nothing to do with my character and my jokes. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad to see that more prominent black athletes are tired. A lot of times they take the, I guess it's cool. And I'm glad to find enough of this. And he's done this before. He did it with the royal family. Like, what was it like sitting next to Prince? And he's like, Jesus was there? Because that's the only king I serve. So he just murders them all the time.
Kat, as a devout Christian and sports lover, how do these comments make you feel?
Like I could be a sports writer.
Yeah. Yahoo Sports.
No, I'm completely serious because I could have known that he would have answered this way. And there are a few things I follow less than basketball, okay? Because you know what I did? I Googled him. You know, like to think that you're going to go into an interview and not Google. This is the same person when he was asked about a meeting with the royal family. He answered something along the lines of, "Oh, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph." Right? This is a Christian man. This is a man who prioritizes his faith, talks about his faith. You could have known he would have answered this way if you bothered to Google. So sports writers don't need to know sports.
Yeah.
Or even pretend or Google it. So I'm just saying, like, you know, if things don't work out here, I'll see y'all on ESPN.
There you go. Michael, do they put basketball games on at the shelter?
They do not.
No, they don't, do they?
No, but they do throw chicken wings from a distance and try to catch them. It's very exciting.
Are they cooked or are they just actual
raw,
wings from chicken?
Raw chicken wings.
So tough. You're in a rural shelter where you actually have to fight to kill the chicken, don't you?
Yes, and you have to ride the rails out of town.
Yeah, with your
feathers out of your teeth.
With your single can of pork and beans.
Well, my belongings on a stick and a bandana.
Segment of it.
Okay. The question was crazy. The sports guy was like, for the first time since 1975. Yeah. Okay, so this was settled in 75. Like, what are we talking? Are we seriously going to argue about lack of diversity in the NBA? Let's have that fight. Paralyzed trans people haven't even coached one team yet. And that's what I want to see. I want to see, let's get in there and fight. Fight, win.
You are
Throw that
insane.
ball and help me change my dress.
You are insane. You are insane tonight, Loftus. You have taken special outrageous pills. All right, last to you, Emily.
I got because of them.
What do you think?
Yeah, I love your point. Do your research. Do your research on the person that they are covering. But the problem is, we live in an anti-Christian, anti-Judeo-Christian society. So that's why Harrison
Butker.
Thank you. I always think Butkus, and I know that's a right name. Why he was vilified for speaking up for his faith at a Catholic college. I had a note that the NFL had no problem having Pray for Damar be their Twitter handle, all 32 teams, when he tragically dropped on the field. Like, prayer is only okay when everyone else does it. So I just applaud this coach, irrespective of sports, team, skin colors, anything, for being a bastion and a beacon, for being a Christian man in this social environment.
All right, wow. All right, up next, a Texas court overrules banning books on butts in school.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling.
Tonight, the cold shoulder for hundreds of passengers stuck overnight in a Canadian airport, famous for warm welcomes. Diverted, delayed, and forced to sleep on the floor.
When we knew that we were going to be stuck there, it was really frustrating because the hotel we had booked was literally 5 minutes away.
The anger and the apology from Canadian customs officials. No traitors in Parliament, according to a party leader who has seen the top secret report.
I'm just begging my colleagues, particularly the leaders of the other parties, not to let this descend into a witch hunt.
As allegations of another foreign misinformation campaign surface.
No one in this country is above the law.
Also, an unprecedented verdict. The sitting U.S. president's son found guilty of 3 felonies.
And now you can show me, yeah.
And that's what happens, and it's very difficult for me.
Plus, legendary singer Celine Dion opens up about her health and her career. And what SpaceX is doing in Saskatchewan.
I'm afraid we're not able to make any other comments.
Removing space junk that fell from the sky and landed on farmland.
Those pieces are huge.
CTV National News with Omar.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Hamas has accepted a United Nations Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. The U.S. supported resolution passed Monday on a vote of 14-0 after Russia abstained. Its passage came after the Biden administration vetoed 3 previous resolutions calling for a ceasefire. Palestinian ambassador to the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, called the resolution a step in the right direction and demanded a permanent ceasefire.
Our position has been always to have an immediate ceasefire to stop the killing of our people. So this resolution is a step in that direction. The proof is in the details, and we want to see that this resolution to be implemented beginning with the ceasefire, and that this ceasefire to be permanent. We do not want to see the continuation of fighting.
In a statement, Hamas said it would accept the ceasefire resolution and was ready to work with mediators to engage in indirect negotiations with Israel. Top U.S. officials have said Israel would accept the plan, contradicting statements by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Meanwhile, there's been no let-up in Israel's assault. Following the resolution's passage, Israeli attacks have killed at least 11 people in northern and central Gaza. This all comes as world leaders and top 8 officials are gathered in Jordan for an emergency humanitarian summit on Gaza. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas are attending the summit. Israel was reportedly not invited. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces raided the Al-Farah refugee camp Monday, killing at least 3 people, including a 15-year-old Palestinian teenager named Mahmoud al-Nabrisi. This is a resident of the Al-Farah camp.
They raided the house and damaged everything. And the house and the ceiling, everything. They ruined the washer and refrigerator, the bathroom, not leaving anything in it. They are terrorists and do not care for anyone.
Israeli forces have also arrested multiple children in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem in recent days. Since October 7th, Israel's killed over 530 Palestinians in the West Bank and arrested over 9,000. Rods and fireworks attack students at a Gaza peace encampment. A federal jury in Florida has ordered Chiquita Brands International to pay over $38 million in damages to the families of 8 Colombian men who were killed by paramilitaries that the banana giant funded. Chiquita previously pleaded guilty to paying the far-right United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia paramilitary group, or AUC, $1.7 million from 2001 to 2004, which Chiquita argued it did to protect its workers. The AUC has been found responsible for committing mass human rights abuses and murdering civilians from 1997 to 2006. Earth Rights International, which helped represent the plaintiffs, said in a statement, quote, "This verdict sends a powerful message to corporations everywhere. Profiting from human rights abuses will not go unpunished. These families, victimized by armed groups and corporations, asserted their power and prevailed in the judicial process," they said. Belgium's prime minister has formally resigned following a surge of support for far-right candidates on Sunday when Belgian voters cast ballots in general, regional, and European elections. The right-wing anti-immigrant New Flemish Alliance will lead negotiations to form a coalition government in Belgium. This came as part of a wave of gains by Eurosceptic and far-right parties in EU elections over the weekend. We'll have more on those elections and the rise of the far-right in France after headlines. Newly published audio reveals Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito questioning whether the United States can overcome its polarized political divide and appearing to endorse a Christian theocracy. Justice Alito made the comments at the annual dinner of the Supreme Court Historical Society June 3rd. The audio was secretly recorded by documentarian Lauren Windsor, who posed as a conservative activist. In the recording, Justice Alito agrees when Windsor says she hopes to, quote, return our country to a place of godliness. And Alito appears to rule out compromise between polarized political factions.
One side or the other is I don't know. I mean, there can be a way of working, a way of living together peacefully, but it's difficult, because there are differences on fundamental things that really can't be compromised. It's not like we're going to split the difference.
In a separate recording from the same event, Justice Alito's wife, Martha Ann Baumgartner, complains about rainbow flags during Pride Month, quotes at length from the Bible, assails feminists as feminazis, and boasts of her German heritage. In May, Justice Alito told Congress he will not recuse himself from cases involving Donald Trump and the January 6th Capitol insurrection after photos emerged of 2 flags associated with election deniers flying in front of his homes in Virginia and New Jersey. Donald Trump sat for a virtual interview Monday with a New York probation officer ahead of his July 11th sentencing for his conviction on 34 felony counts of conspiring to interfere with the 2016 election. In other Trump news, the presumptive Republican presidential nominee held an outdoor Las Vegas rally Sunday at temperatures soaring over 100 degrees in the desert city. Trump joked to his supporters they should not die before they're able to vote for him.
Nice. You feel the breeze? Because I don't want anybody going on me. We need every voter. I don't care about you. I just want your vote. I don't care.
6 rally goers had to be taken to a hospital. Another 24 received on-site medical attention due to the intense heat. Meanwhile, in Arizona, Rudy Giuliani was booked and posted a $10,000 bond in the Arizona criminal case involving the use of fake electors to overturn Trump's 2020 loss. Jury deliberations are underway in Hunter Biden's gun trial. The president's son is accused of illegally purchasing a gun at a time when he was using drugs. Hunter Biden's defense team argued he was in recovery and not a drug user at the time. If convicted, he could face up to 25 years in prison, though would likely receive a much lighter sentence. And the Reverend James Lawson has died at the age of 95. Lawson was a godfather of the civil rights movement, whom Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once called the leading theorist and strategist of nonviolence in the world. During the Korean War in the 50s, James Lawson was imprisoned for refusing to be drafted into the U.S. Army. He was later expelled from Vanderbilt University Divinity School for helping to organize lunch counter sit-in protests against segregation. As a missionary in India, Lawson studied Mahatma Gandhi's principles of nonviolence. He would go on to teach nonviolent civil disobedience tactics to rank-and-file activists in the civil rights movement. In 2020, Reverend Lawson was among speakers at the funeral of Congressmember John Lewis at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta.
We will not be quiet as long as our nation continues to be the most violent culture in the history of humankind. We will not be quiet as long as our economy is shaped not by freedom, but by plantation capitalism that continues to cause domination and control rather than access and liberty and equality for all.
To see our interview with Reverend James Lawson, you can go to democracynow.org. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org.
Across Africa, what's happening across the continent? With Georgia Calvin-Smith on France 24.
You're watching Daybreak here on France 24. I'm Haxi Myers-Belkin. Our top stories today. French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal breaks his silence to say he'll leave the ruling party's campaign ahead of snap parliamentary elections in just 18 days' time. That amid growing calls for the resignation of Éric Ciotti, the leader of the Conservative Républicain Party, called for an alliance with the far right. Hamas says it's seeking amendments to the US drafted ceasefire deal for Gaza that, according to Washington, Israel had accepted. Mediators Qatar and Egypt say they're now studying Hamas's response. And Hunter Biden, the son of US President Joe Biden, could face up to 25 years behind bars after being convicted of 3 felony charges. Prosecution successfully convincing jurors that Biden lied on a gun purchase form about his drug use. French Prime Minister Gabriel Attal hadn't been seen in public for 2 days after the ruling Renaissance Party's resounding defeat in Sunday's European elections, but he has now broken his silence. Attal announcing that he will lead his party's campaign ahead of snap legislative elections called for the 30th of June. President Macron's response to the far right securing the lion's share of French votes for the European Parliament. James Vecina reports.
After deciding to dissolve the Assembly, Emmanuel Macron now faces an uphill challenge.
With the far right on the rise, his Renaissance party is in dire need of better electoral support. But his Prime Minister has given little indication as to where that backing will be coming from.
You need a majority. What will you do if you don't get one?
We're going to work to get a majority.
By reaching out to socialists and conservatives willing to.
By reaching out to the French people, their expectations and their concerns. We'll convince them that our solutions are the most coherent and most effective. That the dream sold by the far left and far right will lead us into chaos and ruin.
One point was made clear, though. Prime Minister Attal will be leading the campaign. Renaissance is looking to counter Marine Le Pen's popularity on the far right and fend off support for a new union between leftist parties. Amid this movement on the political spectrum, the president has pushed back his planned press conference to this Wednesday, a meeting in which he's expected to clarify his party's position and give a sense of the direction in which he wants to take France for the rest of his mandate.
France's Conservative Républicain Party has been thrown into crisis after the party's leader, Eric Ciotti, called for an alliance with the far-right National Rally Party. The move reverses a decades-long political consensus here in France, in French politics, that moderate parties should work together to keep the far-right from power at all costs. French Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin has described that proposed alliance as shameful. Charlotte Hughes has the latest.
A now divided party. Voters and supporters of the Republicans now face a dilemma: its alliance with the National Rally. These young members of the party are against the union.
I'm very shocked because we're a Republican party that defends Republican values, and to ally with the National Rally, which doesn't defend any of these values. As a supporter of the Republicans, I couldn't endorse it.
Both criticise Eric Ciotti of being too single-minded.
We don't need to go with Le Pen as we don't need to go with Macron. There is another solution. We have values to defend. We won 7% in the elections.
Supporters of the party in this affluent district of Paris also oppose a shift towards Marine Le Pen.
Alliances with extremes. That's not what I want. It's not democratically good for France.
Over in Cannes, where many voted for the National Rally on Sunday, some who voted for the Republicans welcomed the alliance.
They need to join together to make something powerful, and then they need to change the country. I don't see an alternative.
This woman who voted for the Republicans also hailed the move.
I'm in favor of it because why not? There has to be an agreement.
These supporters of the Republicans hope the agreement will enable the National Rally to come to power.
It's time maybe to do something different, and why not with the National Rally? Let's see what they're capable of.
A poll by the Figaro and Odoxa indicated that 50% of right-wing voters are in favour of the alliance.
And this Wednesday morning, we'll be hearing from President Emmanuel Macron himself. We'll be giving a press conference at 11 a.m. Paris time. That's 9 a.m. GMT. We'll be covering it all live here on France 24, of course, with analysis afterwards. So do join us for that if you can. Hamas has said that its positive response to a US-drafted ceasefire plan for Gaza opens up a wide pathway to reach an agreement, a response that nonetheless fell short of agreeing outright to the proposal on the table. Israel, according to the US, has agreed to the deal. The major sticking point, Hamas's insistence on guarantees that any temporary ceasefire must then lead to a permanent end to hostilities in Gaza. Caitlin Kelly has the latest.
Hopes of a breakthrough deal were thrown into disarray on Tuesday as Hamas returned yet another iteration of the latest truce agreement put forward by the US and Israel. But Israel say Hamas have changed the proposal's main parameters, as reports suggest the group made amendments, including a new timeline for a permanent ceasefire and the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. In a statement, Egyptian and Qatari mediators said they received a response from the Palestinian Islamic Resistance Movement, Hamas, and the Palestinian factions regarding the most recent proposal for a ceasefire deal and the exchange of prisoners and detainees. US officials say they are reviewing the latest plans, as the death toll climbs to over 37,000 in Gaza, according to the health ministry. A respite for many cannot come soon enough.
That it is absolutely clear what we all need for the people of Gaza is a ceasefire. We've been saying that for months. This is simply one more nail in the coffin.
Referring to the Israeli forces' operation to retrieve 4 hostages that left more than 270 people dead and 700 injured. For thousands, the path for a peaceful solution is more urgent than ever.
Now, as the war in Gaza rages on, the Palestinian Health Ministry in Ramallah says that 6 Palestinian men were killed on Tuesday during an Israeli army raid in the northern occupied West Bank village of Kfar Dan. The Israeli military, for its part, saying it conducted a counter-terror activity in the area, during which 4 militants were killed. Hunter Biden, the son of US President Joe Biden, has been convicted of 3 felony charges. Those counts stemming from his purchase of a revolver in 2018 when, according to prosecutors, he lied on a form to hide his addiction to drugs. Hunter Biden now facing up to 25 years in prison, although as a first-time offender, he may be spared a custodial sentence. Our Washington correspondent Fraser Jackson has more.
It's certainly been something that the media has been following very closely, and that's because it's been a couple of weeks of presidential firsts. First, we had the first ever president to be convicted of a crime, and now we have the first ever immediate member of a president's family to be convicted of a crime while that president is in office. 3 felony gun charges that Hunter Biden was facing in Wilmington, Delaware. One of them lying to a licensed arms dealer, the other lying on a background check form regarding addiction, and then thirdly, the legal possession of a weapon itself. Now, the defense counsel for Hunter was likely hoping they would be able to have one of the 12 jury members not convict, which would result in a hung jury, and that was something that they thought they had a good chance of getting, because the jury members, some of them had members of their family who had suffered with addiction as well. So they were hoping they might have some lenient ears in that jury box, but ultimately, hours later, to Paris. So that shows the level of commitment that the Biden family has been providing to Hunter.
Ukrainian air defense systems have been repelling Russian airstrikes directed at Kyiv. That according to Kyiv's military administration. Witnesses telling Reuters news agency that several blasts were heard in and around the capital, while air raid alerts could be heard across the country from midnight onwards. Wednesday marks the second day of a conference in Berlin on rebuilding Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in attendance, seeking extra funding both from the German state and also from private investors. Zelensky on Tuesday invoking the division of Germany into two separate countries in the wake of World War II to describe what was now at stake in Ukraine. Let's take a listen.
You know this from your own experience, and that's why you can understand us Ukrainians.
Time now for some other world news stories we're covering today here on Daybreak. Almost 2 weeks on from the appointment of the new Prime Minister in Haiti, the country now has a new cabinet. In a stark departure from the previous government, new appointees have been drawn largely from outside the country's political class. That cabinet announces the country continues to grapple with an acute humanitarian crisis fueled by armed gangs. Malawi's Vice President Saulos Chilima is confirmed dead after search teams located the site where his plane came down on Monday. 8 other people were on board. There were no survivors. The country's president calling the accident a terrible tragedy. And more than 4,000 displaced Mexicans currently housed in camps are weighing up their futures after being forced to flee their homes in the face of a weekend of bloody gang violence in the southern state of Chiapas. Battles between rival drug cartels hitting several townships near the Guatemalan border, home to a key route for smuggling drugs and also migrants. Tensions between North and South Korea, technically at war for over 70 years now, have ramped up in recent weeks, with balloons constituting the latest weapon of choice. North Korea has sent more than 1,000 balloons south, most laden with rubbish and some with what appear to be animal feces. Seoul, in response, sending balloons capable of dispersing leaflets and also audio messages. Kaylin Kelly explains.
Kim Jong-un is a traitor that opposes South, mostly filled with garbage and even animal feces.
She was an icon of French pop music, one of the biggest stars of the so-called yéyé boom that swept across Europe in the 60s. Françoise Hardy has died at the age of 80 after a long battle with cancer. Renowned for her hits Comment te dire adieu and Le temps de l'amour last night.
With ABC News.
Today, former NRL player Jared Haynes will walk free after his sexual assault convictions were quashed on appeal. Also ahead, 2 men charged with murder after a body's found in an abandoned quarry north of Brisbane. Joe Biden stands by his son after he's found guilty of breaching gun laws, and calls for the federal government to offer free or cheap childcare to families. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ros Childs. Former NRL star Jared Haynes has been granted bail after winning an appeal against his conviction for sexually assaulting a woman in Newcastle in 2018. The appeal judges say a decision on whether to hold another trial is now a matter for the New South Wales Director of Public Prosecutions. Court reporter Jamie McKinnell has the latest.
He had 3 different grounds, and he was successful on 2 of those grounds. We might get to where we hear more about that question will be in late July when Jared Haynes has another court date to Ros.
Jamie, thank you. 2 men have been charged with murder after the body of a 25-year-old man was found at an abandoned quarry north of Brisbane. Reporter Sarah Richards has more from Caboolture.
The 25-year-old First Nation man Jay Gray was initially reported missing from Moray Field, north of Brisbane in June. Police yesterday located his body in an abandoned quarry. It's alleged a 19-year-old and a 22-year-old man lured him to a property in the Glasshouse Mountains. Police say the men stabbed him multiple times and killed him by interfering. Police investigations are ongoing.
The jury in the Greg Lynn murder trial is expected to start deliberating as soon as tomorrow as the defence wraps up its closing arguments. The former pilot has pleaded not guilty to 2 counts of murder. Sign Balance reports.
After almost 5 weeks, this high-profile murder trial, the prosecution says that's an elaborate fiction, alleging he murdered them, then destroyed evidence. It's expected the jury will start deliberating by the end of the week, meaning after 4 years, the families could have answers within days.
A man has pleaded guilty to the murder of a mother of 4 in Bendigo last year. 44-year-old James William Pulilich today pleaded guilty in the Bendigo Magistrates Court following the death of Kangaroo Flat mum Annalyn Logie Osias in October last year. He'll next appear in the Supreme Court of Victoria later this month. 3 other charges before the court were withdrawn. A teenage boy has been arrested, questioned and released after fake nude images of at least 50 schoolgirls were circulated online. Bacchus Marsh Grammar School believes the girls' faces were taken from their social media accounts and then manipulated using artificial intelligence. Patrick Mitchell reports.
Some of the more than 50 students at Bacchus Marsh Grammar were among those who first raised the alarm earlier this week. Police say the images were sent to someone in the know. Anything involving child abuse material will be covered by existing laws.
Patrick Mitchell there. Families should be offered free or cheaper childcare regardless of their income or work status, according to a new report. The policy think tank, the Centre for Policy Development, has made a series of recommendations on how to change Australia's early childhood sector. Political reporter Stephanie Boris has more.
Well, this report is looking at how we can make Australia's childcare system more accessible.
There's been another historic conviction in the United States, with the son of the president, Hunter Biden, found guilty of lying about his drug use when buying a gun. He could be sentenced to up to 25 years behind bars, and his father, Joe Biden, has ruled out issuing a presidential pardon. It's the second guilty verdict to rock the US election campaign, coming just weeks after Donald Trump was convicted. Our North America correspondent Barbara Miller was in court and reports from Wilmington, Delaware.
Flanked by his wife and the First Lady, the president receives court a convicted felon after just 3 hours.
Hamas has given a formal response to a US-backed Gaza ceasefire plan, saying it was responsible, serious and positive, and opens up a wide pathway to reach an agreement. It comes days after the UN Security Council passed a resolution backing the plan, which calls for a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The proposal sets out conditions, including the release of Israeli hostages and the exchange of Palestinian prisoners. Ceasefire mediators in Qatar and Egypt have confirmed they've received the response, and White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby says it is helpful that Hamas had responded, and US officials are evaluating the group's requests.
We're in receipt of this reply that Hamas delivered to Qatar and to Egypt, and we are evaluating it right now. And I think that's really as far as I'm going to go today. Just that we have this response and we're working our way through it and looking at it.
Australia has announced an extra $10 million in funding for the World Food Programme to deliver urgent humanitarian aid to Gaza. Government frontbencher Anne Ali announced the funding at an emergency international conference on assistance for Gaza being held in Jordan. Australia has now given more than $72 million to help with the situation in Gaza since the October the 7th Hamas attacks. During the meeting, Israel was urged to facilitate the flow of aid into Gaza to improve the worsening humanitarian situation. Ms. Ali says Israel needs to heed international calls.
Ultimately, this is about Israel taking responsibility for this, and this was something that we emphasised in our intervention, that Israel must allow the flow of aid into Gaza and throughout the distribution of aid throughout Gaza.
The UN agency says at least 49 people have been killed and another 140 are missing after a boat carrying migrants sank off the coast of Yemen. Survivors have told rescue workers that the boat capsized in strong winds. Fishermen have rescued nearly 80 people, but around 140 remain unaccounted for. A brand new Pacific patrol boat has run aground in Fiji just a few months after it was handed over by the Australian government. The boat hit a reef on its maiden voyage about 300 kilometres south of the capital Suva. It's the fourth Guardian-class vessel to be damaged in the Pacific over the last 3 years. Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts has the latest.
It's not clear exactly what went wrong, although the ABC has spoken to some locals in the area and they say the passage that the vessel was trying to go through will want to arrest as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Stephen. To some breaking news now, a Senate committee is calling on PwC to disclose the names and positions of those involved in the embattled consultancy firm's controversial tax leak scandal. The request forms part of 12 recommendations just tabled by the committee into the inquiry into management and assurance of integrity by consulting services. The inquiry was launched in the wake of the PwC tax leak scandal, where the firm leaked sensitive Australian government information to corporations. We'll get more analysis later this hour with reporter Amelia Turs on that news just in. Let's get finance news now with Alicia Barry. Hey, Alicia. So executive pay packets are rising faster than those of average workers.
Yeah, the Governance Institute.
While other families should pay just $30 for 3 days of care. One of Australia's most powerful energy watchdogs has flagged a shake-up of electricity pricing rules amid concerns about the spread of complex tariffs affecting consumers. The chair of the Australian Energy Market Commission has made a keynote address at the Australian Energy Week conference in Melbourne today. Energy reporter Daniel Mercer has the details.
What it really goes to is
The news for now. Reminder, you can keep up to date on all the latest news across all your devices at news.abc.net.au and on ABC iView. I'm Ross Childs. More on our top stories coming up on the ABC News channel.
How long?
This is Asia Now.
It's 2 p.m. in Singapore and Hong Kong, 11:30 in New Delhi and 1 o'clock in Jakarta. I'm Paul Sergi. At this hour, Hong Kong revokes the passports of 6 anti-government activists who fled to the UK. Government labels them as lawless wanted criminals, accusing them of endangering national security. An upcoming United Nations report is highlighting extreme levels of violations against children, with wars in the Middle East and Sudan to be partly blamed for the unprecedented scale. Ceasefire efforts in Gaza facing another setback after Israel claims Hamas has rejected the latest proposal. The militant group, though, stating it has accepted the UN-endorsed resolution and is ready to negotiate a complete halt to the war. Hong Kong has cancelled the passports of 6 anti-government activists, all with active arrest warrants and currently living in the UK. All 6 individuals, including prominent former student leader Nathan Law, are accused of committing offences endangering national security. Hong Kong's government said in a statement that the security chief Chris Tang has exercised his powers granted by the city's national security law to impose a restriction on these 6 individuals. A government spokesperson described them as lawless wanted criminals hiding in the UK, adding that they were continuing to blatantly engage in activities that endanger national security. The 6 activists are also accused of colluding with external forces to protect their, quote, evil deeds.
Under our suspension requirement, even they want to apply for a new passport, it won't be allowed. And as I said, it will be illegal to provide fund or to handle the fundings. It doesn't matter which platform it is, as long as they are providing funding or assisting them to handle the funding, will be subject to criminal sanction.
Police say anyone offering funds, leasing property or running a business with those 6 activists could face up to 7 years in jail.
It's been confirmed that Malawi's Vice President Cyrus Chilema was killed along with 9 others in a plane crash. The wreckage of the military aircraft, which went missing on Monday, was found in a forest in the north of the country.
A search and rescue team in the Chikangawa forest, and they have found it completely destroyed with no survivors, as all passengers on board were killed on impact. Words cannot describe how heartbreaking this is, and I can only imagine how much pain and anguish you all must be feeling at this time, as well as how much pain and anguish you all will be feeling in the coming days and weeks as we mourn this terrible loss.
Former First Lady Shanil Jimbiri was among the dead.
It is important that we comfort each other now and in the weeks to come as we mourn together. Dr. Cyrus Klaus Chilema was a good man, a devoted father and husband, a patriotic citizen who served his country with distinction, and a formidable vice president. I consider it one of the greatest honors of my life to have had him as my deputy and counselor for the past 4 years. And his passing is a terrible loss to his Mary, his family, his friends, his colleagues in the cabinet, and to all of us as a nation that found his leadership and courage a source of inspiration.
Chilema was seen as a potential candidate in next year's presidential elections. Volunteers searching for bodies in the Democratic Republic of Congo following a deadly attack on Friday by militants and Islamist rebels. The death toll in the eastern North Kivu province has risen to at least 41. We learned that our fleeing family members were killed along the way. Here we have 2 bodies, a girl and a boy. Look how they were killed. Locals say armed men using guns and machetes attacked residents of villages in the region. They say more than 80 people have been killed in the area since last Tuesday. The army says the Allied Democratic Forces are behind these latest attacks. The group has pledged allegiance to Islamic State. In the village of Masala, the population is still in shock. I asked the authorities to continue to protect us because we don't know exactly where we are after the attack. The militants also destroyed homes and other structures during the attack. The eastern part of the DRC has been plagued by violence from local and foreign armed groups for nearly 30 years, which has displaced more than 7 million people.
Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court on Tuesday appealed for information and evidence of atrocities committed in Sudan, saying that his ongoing investigation seems to disclose an organized, systematic, and profound attack on human dignity.
The evidence my office has collected to date seems to show credible, repeated, expanding, continuous allegations of attacks against the civilian population, in particular, attacks directed against camps for internally displaced persons. It seems to show the widespread, prevalent use of rape and other forms of sexual violence.
The ICC prosecutor Karim Khan issued a statement in response to the recent attack in Darfur.
It is an outrage that we are allowing history to repeat itself once again in Darfur. We cannot and we must not allow Darfur to become the world's forgotten atrocity once again.
Jacob Zuma's MK party has requested the highest court in South Africa to prevent the newly elected parliament from convening this week, citing allegations of fraud during the May 29 vote. The National Assembly is scheduled to meet on Friday for the swearing-in of lawmakers and the election of key officials, including the Speaker, the Deputy Speaker, and the President of the country. The African National Congress ANC, which has held power since the end of apartheid in 1994, lost its majority but remained the largest party. MK, on the other hand, achieved an unexpected third place, securing 14.6% of the vote, which corresponds to 58 seats in the 400-seat chamber. The ANC expressed its preference last week for establishing a comprehensive government of national unity. However, certain smaller parties have mutually rejected each other, leaving uncertainty as whether an agreement will be reached by Friday and who will be included in it.
Thank you for watching and privilege of your time. This is Amir 5858. I am Amir Woodman. Have a good life.